Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to the Cosmic Catch-Up. I'm Corri.
And I'm Dana. We're real-life sisters who said no thanks to the 9-to-5 grind and yes, please, to the stars, spirit, and soul-led living.
Around here, we're talking ascension, astrology, human design, sound healing, and the messy magic of waking up.
So if you've ever thought, there's got to be more than this, you're our people. Two sisters, deep talks, whole lot of magic. Let's catch up.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Much better this week than I was doing last week.
I'm very glad to hear it. I thought yesterday was fun.
Yesterday was so much fun.
We had a little woo crew meetup with several of our woo friends, which is fabulous and highly recommended. I think the energy is always really fun, and we do different things like we read some tarot and do some psychic readings and just, feel the energy, be within the energy, which feels really good. And I think one of my favorite things is you do some astrology updates for us during our meetings. And everyone always loves that because you are our astrologer. So that I think was really good timing as we dig into astrology today.
Well, it's my favorite topic, so I'm really excited to speak about it, and I can be long-winded. So you might have to, wrap it up for me when I need to,
because I'll try to keep it moving.
It's my favorite topic. So yeah.
Well, let's start with some questions, okay?
Okay.
All right. So what first sparked your interest in astrology?
Oh gosh, I would say that, growing up, they always had little 2 to 3 sentence horoscopes in the back of magazines, and like fashion magazines and whatnot. And I always read those growing up and would kind of laugh about them because they were so broad and so general. I didn't really give much credence to them, but you love hearing about yourself. Well, why not read them? I don't think I really got interested in astrology until much later and for various reasons, but I really hadn't even thought about it, but I was getting some acupuncture. My first time getting acupuncture, I was having some lower back pain. This was 2017 maybe. And just chatting with my acupuncturist, and she made an offhanded comment that it was time for her to schedule an appointment with her astrologer and get a reading. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard of an actual person being an astrologer. So I was like, call the phone. That's a real job. Like somebody really does this. And of course, that piqued my curiosity. And so I was on my healing journey. I was working with an intuitive healer. I had kind of started playing around with the woo. So I was like, I want a reading. I want to know what this is about. And so went to this astrologer, super cool lady. She was 84 years old at the time and lived in a high rise in uptown Dallas. And I'm like, not a bad life. So she gave me a reading, birth chart reading, and she was incredibly accurate. And I was super impressed. Recorded the session, had fun with it, left, and then did nothing. And for about a whole year.
Did you learn something new about yourself when she gave, or was it, yep, I knew that, or that was intuitive, or were you surprised that she knew so much about you through your birth chart?
Well, I was very surprised that she could really describe me so accurately just with that information. Before going, I only knew my sun sign, which is what most of us know. That's your birth date, kind of thing. I learned what a rising sign. I learned, about all of my planets and what they meant. But it didn't really stick with me these are the meanings of these things. It was more, she was able to identify personality traits and how I move through the world, and I didn't really have to say anything. I was able to ask some questions about things. But it was really fascinating reading. And, I recorded the session, which I always recommend for my own clients because there is so much information. And it was cool and fun. And I left. And not quite a year later, I think you had reached out and said, hey, give me that astrologer lady's name, because you and another friend were having fun with things and wanted to check it out. So this was 2018-ish. So that sparked me to go back and say, I'm going to listen to my reading that I did a year ago. I didn't even remember what we talked about. And again, the reason why I recommend people record these is that I heard something the second time listening to it that I missed, that didn't stick with me from the original reading, and then I'd completely forgotten about, and hearing it in the recording This astrologer's name is Diane Eichenbaum, and said in the reading that she's like, because I was asking about career and things and, very common questions. And she said, well, you could do what I do. I was like, what do you mean? I actually asked, I was like, what do you mean? She said, well, it can be astrology, but it doesn't have to be, anything in the metaphysical space. And I was like, well, what is metaphysics? And she explained it all to me. And I was like, cool. And then we moved on. And it really stood out to me that year later reading it. And this is just, again, a great example of divine timing and what it means to plant seeds and what it means to kind of pull threads when you get a nudging or you get an inkling or you get this idea in your head and you're like, well, maybe these are the kind of the little guides that lead us down our paths. And so I listened to that recording. I went ahead and booked a second reading with her. And again, it was highly accurate. Great conversation.
Why did you book a second reading?
I wanted to understand, I was kind of in a place of what am I doing with my life again? Like I hadn't really kind of come up with any answers.
Was it a birth chart reading again?
No, no, no. You do that one time. You don't need to do another birth chart reading. After that, you move into the transits. And so I was more curious, some questions about what was going on in my life and how do I,
So you can see an astrologer often.
Well, yeah, you can. I definitely, it depends on how long. If you have a specific question, they're great for that. If you want to know about timing, it's fantastic for that. If you are just looking for like what's the next couple months ahead, then yeah, you get that reading. And then after those couple of months are done, then you can go get another reading. There's lots of different types of readings as well. So I wanted to generally know about job, career, love life. Those are some pretty common questions.
Who doesn't want to know about those
Right.
things?
Those are the common questions people ask. So from that, it led me to that second reading, which again was highly accurate. And I left, she'd printed out my chart, and there were 3 wheels on this chart, and it was full of symbols, looked completely chaotic, and there was lots of lines on it. And I looked down at it, and it was just a hot mess. But I left thinking, again, this is your team and spirit kind of guiding you on a path. I left thinking, it would be really cool if I could read this one day. Like, if I could sit down and read what my chart says. Like, everything she just told me looked like a hodgepodge mess on this piece of paper. And I was like, it'd be really cool, like, if I could read this. And that thought kind of stuck with me.
So leading into that, how did it evolve from that curiosity into something that you decided, I'm actually going to pursue this?
It was a slow process. I would say it took several months to unfold. Again, I got that second reading in 2018, and I was just curious enough to start looking a few things up online. Like, what does this little mean thing? Or what does it mean to have a Virgo rising? Just taking what she had told me. I was like, what does that really mean? And the internet is so vast and so full of astrology information. There is amazing websites out there, but it was also so overwhelming. I was like, I don't even know where to begin to look at things. I was just kind of combing the internet. And some people can teach themselves based on that, like self-taught astrology. I am not one of those individuals. My mind is a little bit more, tries to be more organized than that. And it was, again, just so overwhelming, the amount of information out there. So I found there was one of the metaphysical shops that we liked to frequent back then had classes periodically, and they had a 4-week in-person astrology class. And it was just enough to like really get me interested, because you couldn't really go too deep in 4 classes, but it was just enough to really perk my interest. And so I mentioned this to our mentor and guide, Jenny, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for you. Yes, you have to do this. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm just like kind of curious about this thing. I don't know if it's my thing. And she's like, no, it is. And then she gave me a couple of teachers of astrology who had online courses. And she's like, check them out, look at their work. They've got YouTube channels, whatnot. If you resonate with either one of them, then explore their classes. If not, there's plenty of people who teach online. You can find a class for you. And she did, one of the people she gave me did resonate. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this. But I wasn't telling people I was going to do this. Like, Jenny was the only one I told I was going to do this. And so I went ahead and did the class. It was go at your own pace. The fastest really you could complete it was about 6 months. You could take longer if you wanted. It was, again, go at your own pace. And so I signed up and I was like, I guess, I can do this. Why not? I've just kind of felt that pull and that curiosity for it that was like, okay, let's just go see where this leads. And I did finish the course in just over 6 months. But part of that, of our lesson, was that our teacher was like, you have to start reading for people before you finish the class. And I was like, what? That's not right. So, so she's like, well, you're reading for free, but you need to start putting this into practice. And it's a great teaching kind of tool to say, like, you can start doing this like right away, get feedback, start practicing it. And so I had to tell some more people because I needed people to practice on. So I think that's when I shared it with you and a few others and started doing, practice readings for people.
So as you started taking the classes, clearly we know how it ended, but would you say that got you more and more excited about it? Or how were you feeling as you were going through the classes? Was it just something to complete, or were you really feeling intuitively called to this modality?
It was hard for me. At first it was like, oh, this is so fun and interesting. And then there were moments of, as you're kind of going through this, and I think this is common for a lot of people too, is that it was just so overwhelming, even with the information, and it was packaged really well and it had a good flow. Like her courses had a really good flow to them. I would definitely recommend her as a teacher, but it's so much. It was so much. And I would because I'm doing this after work. I'm still working a full-time job and I'm doing these classes at night after work and I am just like overwhelmed. So there was a lot of moments in there that I was like, I don't know that I'm going to get this. But she prefaced it, as many teachers of this do, is like, it's not going to make sense for a while. And then suddenly one day you'll wake up and it clicks. And there was that click moment. I would say I was probably 3 or 4 months in. And it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I see the patterns. There is some learning and memorization, as with a lot of things, of like, you need to know what the signs mean. You need to know what the planets mean, the houses mean. If you can get those basic things down, then you can figure out astrology. But I had to make myself flashcards. Like, I had to write Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, mutable fire. Here's the high end of the energy spectrum. Here's the low end of it and how it manifests. Like, I made myself flashcards. And
You're a true student.
I am a total student. And, that makes complete sense. Being a Sagittarius and having my Mercury in Sagittarius as well as the mind, Mercury being how you learn, very expansive. Like, I am the eternal student. So yeah, I did all the tricks.
So knowing where you were and then moving through that whole process and you come out and you're an official astrologer, how would you explain astrology to someone who only knows horoscopes? That was you at one point.
Oh, for sure. Well, and every astrologer is a little bit different in how they read all of that. But my take on the birth chart, or your natal chart, it's also known as, this is your energetic blueprint. I believe that our souls pick the day and time. We pick our lives. We have a lot of choice on the other side before we come in. So we pick our families, our parents, all that. And we pick the date and time and place we're born because we want to be born with a particular energetic blueprint that is going to serve us as we move through this life and learn particular lessons. So for me, when I look at astrology from a birth chart perspective, it's very much trying to understand yourself and how you move through the world, how you react to things, what you need to heal in this life, what your bigger purpose of lessons that you've signed up for, all of that's in your chart. So I really look at it as a tool from that perspective. When we get into transits and kind of like what's going on in the world around us, I use it as a forecast. It's like a weather forecast, essentially. So you can look at the weather and know if it's going to rain that day. So then you pack your umbrella. And typically, you don't get as wet because you have that umbrella. And it's true for sunny days as well. Like, I want to know when the sun's going to be shining and it's 75 degrees out so I can plan to be outside and enjoying weather that same way. So when we have positive aspects or negative aspects, having that ability to know in advance so that I can take more advantage of those things. So for me, it's like a tool to live life. Again, how do I use my energy?
Well, and for people who say, oh, astrology's hooey, what do you say to that?
Totally fine. You can think it's hooey. That's just like you chose not to look at the weather. So you're just going to be stuck with whatever you get. So
That's a great point.
I'm like, you don't have to believe in it. I have seen enough proof in just doing the readings and for myself and for others that I'm like, oh, this is a thing. So
Well, it's not really a belief either.
No.
It is. It just is.
It just is,
Right?
it's a practice that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's, three wise men referenced in the Bible, we're also astrologers, looking at the sky, following things. These archetypes that are assigned to the zodiac, all of that, they are representative. I mean, it's been just time tested and proven over and over again. So it's, again, to your point, it's not really a belief system. It's more of that tool to help us navigate the world. And to me, I look at it as the universe is God's clock. So why wouldn't you look at it? Why wouldn't we
Yeah,
pay attention to that?
that's a good point. And I think astrology, correct me if I'm wrong, but kings and queens and even religious, uh, whether it's the popes or, or those that are in high power have used astrologers
Oh, yeah,
for, to your point, thousands of years. They've
definitely.
always been held in high regard.
Definitely. I think it goes through, astrology itself goes through kind of pop cultural waves. I think we're in a wave right now that it's been on the rise and people pay more attention to it. It's been more accepted nowadays than it was, 10, 20 years ago.
Can I throw a conspiracy at you?
Sure.
So I often wonder if astrology was treated as hooey because there's so much truth to it that those that held the power in it didn't want everyone to have access to that. Do you think that's silly?
I don't think that's silly. I believe everything.
I think that, again, my own personal opinion, I think there feels truth to that because when you understand your birth chart, your natal chart, there's a lot of power in that.
Definitely. I think, again, I don't put anything past anybody nowadays, but this idea of, yes, there is the understanding of yourself as a divine sovereign being. So when I see clients, my goal is to empower them to fully embrace who they are. I've seen, hundreds of people and hundreds of charts, and every single one of them is a snowflake. So you are bringing a particular energy to this earth for a particular reason. So yeah, when you have that understanding and you can step into your own power, that is scary to those in control. But there are also lots of different branches of astrology. There's financial astrology. I am not a financial astrologer, but there are.
Could you be, please?
I've been thinking of learning it. That's it should be pretty easy to pick up, but there are financial astrologers out there. So yeah, if you are a person in power who wanted to, grow their money, you could certainly work with a financial astrologer and then again try to discredit astrology to the mainstream so that they're also not plugging into that same information. There's health astrologers, there's mundane astrologers, which is the study of countries and political leaders. I mean, there's so much out there. And that's one of the reasons that I was attracted to astrology because, again, we talk about me being a lifelong learner. I can study this for my entire life and never learn it all. And that to me is so exciting because I'm like, oh, I'll never be bored. There's always another thing to go and learn. So yeah, there's so much you can do with it that for sure.
And you specifically study tropical
Yes,
astrology? Want to touch on that?
there's, again, like we talked about, lots of different branches of it. There's Vedic astrology, which is the Eastern study, and then there is Western astrology or tropical astrology, and it's just based on the Tropic of Cancer and how the planets orbit around, or the Earth orbits, the whole solar system works. So Vedic astrology is a little bit different. I would say that it is equally as accurate and true. It's whichever study resonates with you, the receiver or the reader, that you should look into. So yeah, I might learn that one day as well. So
Focus on financial, please. Asking selfishly. So you had mentioned, I think you said rising. So can you talk about the importance of the sun, the moon, and the rising signs? What does all that mean and why is it important?
yeah, I think when as a personal astrology reader, you look a lot at the personal planets. Those are the ones that have fastest orbits and closest to the Earth. So, imagine it having more of a direct impact on you in your daily life. So the personal planets are your sun, your moon, your rising, as well as Mars, Venus, and Mercury. The sun, the moon, and the rising we call the big three in astrology because of their meaning as part of your core personality. So the sun represents your identity. It's how you see yourself in a nutshell. So
and that's what horoscopes are based on, is the sun.
the horoscope, it can be, well, yes and no. We'll get into that.
Okay.
Your moon sign is your emotional well-being. So this is important because it's how you react under stress. It's what you need to feel safe and secure. So it's the emotional aspect of ourselves, how we deal with our emotions. So it's a really important thing for you to know and understand. Now, you probably already know this about yourself, how you react under stress, but understanding the broader scope of that sign and its energetic spectrum can help you choose how you want to deal with your emotions versus being kind of subject to them owning you. You now get to own your emotions. The rising sign is the filter through which we see the world. So you can imagine putting on a pair of glasses and that's how you see the world. It is also how people see you initially. So when people first meet you, when they first connect with you, these are more of acquaintances. Your close friends and family see everything in you. But again, if you're networking or even if you're at work, these are kind of the impressions you consciously or unconsciously put out into the world. So again, that is another really important aspect of yourself to understand. Before I knew about astrology, I did not understand the feedback I would get from coworkers or people when I first met them. So I've said multiple times, I'm a Sagittarius 5 times over. I've got 5 planets in it. I've got my sun, my moon, my Mercury, and my Mars. So most of the personal planets in Sagittarius as well as Neptune. My rising sign is Virgo. And if you know anything about a Sagittarius, they're very free. It's a fire energy, very flexible, very mutable, very travel oriented, learners, explorers, philosophers. They're kind of like the gypsy of the zodiac, right? And I identified with that. I totally was like, yes, that is me. I love to travel. My house is filled with pictures from places I've been and seen. At work, though, the feedback I would get was on reviews and things. It was very much like, you're so reliable. You're so dedicated. You're so steady. You're so detail oriented. And a Sagittarius, by the way, is not into the details. They are big picture. We are big picture. I was a horrible speller growing up. Corri can attest to this. Like, not into the details. I double book myself on my calendar all the time because I'm like, oh, I didn't pay attention. I just say yes to everything, very much not. But I was getting that on reviews as you're so detail oriented. And it was all felt like a disconnect. I had no idea where people were getting this impression. And then I learned that I was a Virgo rising, and Virgos are very detail oriented. They are very steady. It's an earth energy. So it's a very calming presence. They always are, Virgo rising is put together. Like people would say, oh, your lipstick matches your outfit. I'm like, well, yes, doesn't everyone's? Doesn't everyone's lipstick match? Why would you pick a lipstick that doesn't match your outfit? But it'd be enough that people noticed. So once I understood that, I had some internal conflict. And in that sense of because Virgo squares Sagittarius, it makes a 90-degree angle, which is considered a tough aspect, challenging aspect. And so I didn't like it. Virgos are also notoriously worriers. They're prone to anxiety. They have gut issues. They are super critical. They can be judgmental, perfectionists. I did not want that to be the description of me.
And one of my best friends is a Virgo. So
Oh,
that definitely resonates knowing her, but there's so much beauty
oh,
to Virgos as well.
I love Virgo now.
Yeah.
But that initial, as I was learning astrology, I'm like, this does not sound like a good sign. And I don't want to be associated with it. And this is how people see me. Like, this is their first impression. This is terrible. But once I started to embrace it, oh, Virgo's one of my favorite signs. It's the earth witch. It's what creates order from chaos. All of nature is filled with the glory and beauty of Virgo. Yes, we have some aspects that aren't that great, but
every sign does.
every sign does. So once I started to embrace that aspect of myself, so this is the power in learning your astrology, is that became my superpower because I can see the 30,000-foot view and I can see the details when I want to. When I put in a tiny bit of effort, I can see those details. So that's one of my superpowers. I love pointing out to people what their superpowers are in their chart. Could be aspects of yourself that you didn't like or didn't know about. And then you're like, oh, but if you embrace it, including the shadow side of it, then I can do even more than I thought possible.
You may have just answered this question. So you can tell me if you're like, nope, that was my answer. What do you wish more people knew about their birth chart?
That is a lot of it. understanding when you understand yourself, I think the bigger piece also is understanding the embracing the shadow aspects of the signs as well. Like we all want to think all the good, wonderful things. I just described how lovely Sagittarius energy is, but it's also very flaky and it's also very blunt and direct, and it can be kind of harsh and it can be extremely non-committal. Like, I'm the person who says yes to all the plans and then I back out at the last minute. Not everybody loves that. So there's, once you can kind of embrace that, I understand now I can have a choice. So I don't want to be the person that is flaky all the time. So you just observed in my house, I have 2 calendars. I have a digital calendar and I have a
Mhm.
regular calendar that I write everything that I've committed to on. Before I say yes to something, I will check those calendars to make sure I can actually say yes. But before I knew this about myself, I would just say yes to everything and then, you know, ditch them. So I got to choose, how do I want to be? And I would never have probably grown to that level without understanding myself in the birth chart.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm going to ask this and I have a follow-up if I can remember after
Mm.
this answer. So, what's a good first step for someone who wants to explore astrology deeper? And let me ask, as far as who wants to explore it both from a personal perspective, but also potentially from a professional.
Yeah, I think, gosh, there's so many ways you can go about doing it. There are 1,000 books out there on astrology. Um, I haven't read them all, but
What?
I know,
No?
right? I would say if I would start looking up some books or recommendations. If you have any astrologers you like to follow in social media or who have podcasts about astrology, start digging in and listening and see what you can learn there.
Do you want to give a nod to some that you listen to?
Oh yeah, I love Molly McCord is one of my favorites. You can find her on YouTube and other wherever you get your
And she has
podcasts.
books.
And she has books, and I've purchased a couple of books. I've definitely purchased several of her online classes and gone to some of her workshops. She's an amazing teacher. So big shout out for her. Pam Gregory is also one of my favorites on YouTube. She really looks a lot at global events and then mixes in some personal astrology as well. So I think they're a great combination of folks to listen to. They're probably my favorites, but there's a ton out there. So I think if you're just exploring, I would find someone who you kind of resonate with, see what they have to say about it.
Can I
There's
interject too? I think Pam also has some books. She does not teach anymore other than online on YouTube. Like there aren't classes I don't think that you can get from her. Molly still has those though,
yes.
which is great.
And then Annie Botticelli, and we'll put her information in as well. She was my teacher, so she does an online course, and she was fantastic. But she's also a Sagittarius, so being a Sagittarius and a Sagittarius Mercury, I really resonated with her teaching style very deeply. So you just kind of have to sort around and see who you resonate. So I'd find some people that you trust and who you like and what they have to say. And then like there's books you can go find. There's a ton of websites out there to also kind of, you can again teach yourself as much as possible. And there's a bunch of sites that you can go run your free birth chart on. There's apps. I mean, there's a lot of people that have the apps now that you can plug in your birth information and it'll pull up a chart and give you a horoscope and forecasts and all of that. So there's lots of ways to go about um, getting into it. But I would definitely recommend, if you can, do a reading with a professional astrologer.
Like you, for example.
Well, yes,
And
like
and
me,
we'll
but
have your information in the notes as well if you'd like to book a session with Dana. She does a phenomenal job.
well, thank you. But yeah, I think, get yourself a reading and see what the experience is like.
What are your thoughts on people who are intrigued by it, do a reading, much like you, and then kind of just set it aside and forget? Any perspective on that, or everyone's on their own journey?
Everyone's
So
on their own journey. Like I said, I had a reading and didn't think about it for a year. You know, it just kind of depends on where you're at in your path and what interests you. I think for some it can just be fun to know the information. I do have regular clients who are like, I do 4-month forecasts, and about every 4 months they're like, time for my next time for my next reading. See what's coming up for me. Um, but yeah, I think it's totally fine if you get one reading and you're like, cool, I'm done.
and you're done.
Yeah.
So how has astrology helped you make sense of life in general?
Oh my gosh. Well, again, helped me understand myself a lot, helped me understand my journey. There are also, I would say, some big astrological transits that are tied to us societally that we don't even realize. One of the biggest ones would be your Uranus opposition. And that happens starts around 40 to 42. It is where the midlife crisis comes from. I like to call it a midlife awakening. That midlife point when you start to like question, what am I doing with my life? What's going on? Some people react maybe by getting divorced or buying a fancy car. I reacted by learning astrology. So it was right around that time that I found astrology. I was looking for something different in my life. So to be going through that Uranus opposition and then learning astrology, like that was my choice of like how to break out of my rut, was to do something in the metaphysical space, and I'd never looked back.
But my guess is that depending on where Uranus placement is, also may impact where you go with that, right? So if it's
Oh,
in
definitely.
relationships, or which may be why people are, leaving those, it could be
Mhm.
career, right? So
Yeah.
placement, the planetary placements in the houses themselves have a direct influence over impact.
Yes,
Yes?
astrology is a very layered practice. So you can think of it as the planets are kind of the what. So the sun being your identity, for instance, or Mercury being your mind or how you learn. It's the what. The astrological sign is how the energy emits. So whether you're a Scorpio or a Gemini, that's how the energy kind of goes out into the world. And then the houses are the where. So those are the fields of experience, the areas of life that that energy shows up in. So definitely, my Uranus opposition was happening in my third and my ninth houses, which are learning houses. So I was going to learn something. And the transiting Uranus was in my um, ninth house, which is esoteric, higher learning kinds of metaphysical things. So it
Ding, ding, ding.
totally fits. So this is how accurate you can get in astrology in, quote unquote predictions. It's really not a prediction, but it is a probability and a high probability of where and what's going to happen. What's fun for me about astrology is you can take a look forward. And again, when you're doing a transit reading or any kind of forecasted reading, we're talking about the high level of probability that something's going to happen. So I do appreciate when clients text me or call me and I'm like, oh my God, what you said just happened. Like, there's a high probability that you'll get a promotion or you'll get a job change during this time. And then I get, a couple weeks later, I got a new job. I'm like, yeah, you did. Or you're going to move, or there's going to be a renovation in your house, or the likelihood of meeting, a relationship of some kind. So um, that's what's fun, because then we got to sit back and we have to wait and see what happens. Like, what of the possibilities actually came true? But you can also look back. So I love taking a look back and say, okay, I was going through a really difficult time, during this whatever months or years. And we can go back and see what was happening in your life at that time that might have influenced that. So, for instance, my back issues started, I want to say like 2008, 2009. Surgery wasn't until 2014, but the actual issues started back then. And that is when Saturn was transiting my first house. And Saturn has to do with the back. If you're talking about medical astrology or health astrology. So
In the house?
in the house, the first house is the house of self. So when Saturn was going through the personal house of me is when my back issues started. So it was a sign of like, you need to wake up to something. So it was interesting to be able to go back and take a look and say, oh, that's what, oh, okay, yeah. And I want to clarify that the planets are beings and they are energy themselves. They do not cause things in our lives.
Mercury retrograde doesn't cause bad things to happen?
It does not. It does not cause bad things to happen. They are a reflection of our own internal world. So there's a universal law, as above, so below, as within, so without. So basically, these energetic beings are giving off a frequency. Whatever is happening to us internally is how we are experiencing that frequency. So if you operate at a lower vibration, generally speaking, or more in the negative, or, this is the bad stuff that's going to happen, or I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop, or Mercury retrograde is bad in my mind, then when that happens, that is what you will experience. For me, I love Mercury retrograde because it is a time to rest and relax. All the astrologers out there know with the retrograde, you do the RE things, you can research, You can reassess, rewrite, reevaluate, all of those things. So for me, I love a Mercury retrograde because that's an excuse to take extra naps. So I don't have a bad experience with that transit. We talk about Saturn. Saturn has a bad rap in astrology because it's the adulting planet. I love a Saturn. I was like, I'm going to embrace the adulting planet. And because when you do that, it goes much easier in your life versus when you're resisting it. So I think from that perspective, again, they're just emitting a frequency. How your internal world is, again, how you're going to experience that frequency. So it doesn't have to be bad.
Well, I think that's an interesting point because you mentioned when people get sessions and you talk about all the wonderful things, there are challenging things too. Take a square, for example. And the beauty of having a reading is not that you can make that square disappear, but having a knowledge and understanding that it's there allows you to move through that energy differently than perhaps you would have otherwise, which means it doesn't have to be painful.
Exactly. Challenging aspects are often considered the square is very common, that 90-degree angle. And it is more like a pressure point of a challenge arising to say, like you might need to change something. And you can either resist it and say, I don't want to change, or I don't want to do this differently, or I don't want this hard thing in my life. And then it's going to be really hard. And you're going to have a painful experience trying to move through that energy. Or you can recognize it and say, okay, I have this hard thing in my life. How am I going to choose to react to it? Am I going to resist it, or am I going to accept that it's a challenge and there's something I need to learn in here and look at it as an opportunity for growth? Because ultimately, all of these all this energy is trying to push us forward in our lives to grow. That's the point of our soul being here, is to have particular lessons and to grow. So if I can look at this hard aspect and say, okay, I am prepared that I might get triggered during this time, or that I'm going to have to make some tough decisions or choices, like an opposition would be trying to find balance and having to make choices, hard choices typically. So I'm going to look at this as an opportunity for growth, and I'm going to do the best I can to move through it. And that's that idea of bringing the umbrella on the rainy day, is it's not as hard. Like you don't get rained on. You're like, okay, I see this now as an opportunity for growth, and I'm going to work with it. And there might be some good days, there might be some bad days, but I'm going to move through it. So from that perspective, yeah, it's not as hard when you know that.
Well, and I have shared this multiple times. I think I've talked to you a lot about this, but it's probably something that I think people can relate to when we talk about career. And I believe that's the 10th house. I mean,
One
career
of the
shows
work
up in
houses.
different,
Yeah, shows up in different houses.
places.
That's
But
one of them.
for me, Pluto has been transiting my 10th, and we haven't talked about Pluto, but Pluto is about transformation. I think change. And so when I was laid off, I was like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. And I know for a lot of people, when layoffs happen, it's very intense and personal, and you can be angry at the company and angry at the people, and you project this outer frustration and just bitterness. But for me, it was an opportunity, and it really is for anyone, to be able to look at your astrology and say, well, there it is. Yep. If I don't make changes, it's going to happen regardless. Something is going to influence change. And so embrace it, which is what I did. And it's a lot less painful, right? I didn't feel the pain that a lot of people have in situations like that, because it was expected, or something was expected. And so it wasn't a surprise.
Yeah, I think it's easier to not take it so personally, because we've been talking, Pluto is a very slow moving planet.
Very slow.
It has based on the shape of its orbit, it can go anywhere from 13 to 30 years in a particular sign. So traveling through your 10th house, we knew years in advance that something career-wise was going to shift for you. We didn't know when.
Shift. I think that's a good way to put it too. It wasn't that something bad was going to happen. It wasn't that something great was going to happen. It could be either.
Could be either. Well, it's all in your perspective, right?
That's right.
Whatever you deem good
and
or bad.
I deemed it was great.
You deemed it was great. You were ready for it. So from that perspective of, Pluto being a planet of deep transformation, soul level growth, and soul level change and transformation. So we, as your astrologer, we had been talking about it for a couple of years, that there was going to be some sort of transformative career change for you. maybe in, um, could have been like getting a different job and moving
Mhm.
companies, could have been a layoff, could have been multiple things, could be getting a different job within the same company. Lots
Yep.
of possibilities,
Yep.
right? So we were just like patiently waiting, like, when is this gonna happen? And then it did. And you're exactly right. Like you could have, and you could have wallowed in some of those lower vibrational
Mhm.
feelings, but you were also like, okay, we knew this was coming or something. We
Mhm.
knew some kind of change was coming. And here it is. And I'm going to choose now to look at it as an opportunity because
Yeah.
I now know Pluto was saying where this track you're on isn't where you're supposed to be. So now it's time to make a change.
And I think that is a great example of how everyone has an opportunity when you're looking at your chart is how are you going to receive the information? And are you going to look at it as an opportunity or like frustration and wallow in that? So I think that's a beautiful thing for astrology. So leading into that, can astrology help with decision making or timing?
Oh my God, yes.
You mentioned that we were talking about for a couple of years, but can you give something that's maybe closer in?
Yeah. So when we look at the personal planets and their transits, personal planets being again your sun, your moon. Well, your rising sign doesn't move in astrology, but the moon changes sign and house roughly every 48 hours. You have Mercury, you have Venus, and you have Mars. So when we watch the personal planets, you can definitely, wherever they're moving through in your chart, whatever the sign the energy is in, you can track timing a little bit closer in to say, okay, well, Venus is retrograde, that kind of thing. We just got out of that Venus retrograde. So what are the things you do during that time? And depending upon what house it's transiting through, Venus represents love and money. So we can talk about timing of where there's opportunity potentially to meet people or to earn some more money in that aspect. So yeah, it can definitely help in from that timing perspective.
One of my favorite things that you talk about, so share, is if you're trying to grow your hair long, when's a good time to maybe not cut your hair or when should you cut your hair?
Oh, I love this. So this is from my first teacher, Annie Botticelli. She shared this tip in one of the classes. And I was like, is this real? I mean, I'm gonna try it. Let's just see, because it doesn't right like my I just got my hair cut. It doesn't hurt to try something out. So the best if you're trying to grow your hair long, then you only want to cut it and however, trim or whatever you want to get cut from it after a new moon in a water sign. So the water signs are um, Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio. So you look for the new moon during that time and then, wait a day or so after the new moon, then you can cut your hair because after the new moon is when the moon is growing again, right? So it's growing and your hair is tied to lots of different bodily things. So from that perspective, yeah, if you want to grow it long, only get a trim or cut it after the new moon in a water sign. And I've been doing that for years.
So that to me is a great simple way
Yeah.
to use
You can
astrology.
use it for, oh my gosh, the Farmer's Almanac is all about astrology. It's all about moon cycles. So when you plant things, when you harvest things, it's all according to the moon, and that is all astrology.
Well, and that makes complete sense. And we talk about how the tides are affected by the moon. So there's a lot tied actually into astrology that I don't even think people fully realize.
Oh no, it's been so ingrained in our lives. It's just been sort of, you don't talk about it as astrology, but it has been an active part of our lives. There are
So,
studies that, show this is another one of those major transits that people experience in life is that if you wait to get married until after you're 28 years old, you are less likely to get divorced. Not saying that you can't have a 50-year marriage when you got married before that, but there are just some studies that have shown that after the age of 28, you tend to have fewer divorce rates or lower divorce rates.
is that because of the Saturn return?
That is because of your Saturn return, which happens right around the age of 28, 29. And Saturn has now Saturn takes, it's about that 28, 20-year, 29-year orbit through your entire wheel, your zodiac wheel. And the first 28 years of life, you are understanding life through authority figures, your parents, your teachers, government, whatever. You're learning life and being conditioning of life through that authority figure, which is a lot of what Saturn represents. After your first Saturn return, which is between 28 and 29 years of age, you start to redefine every area of your life through your own authority, your own personal authority, not your parents anymore, not your teachers. You probably don't have any teachers anymore, from that perspective. So for me, I now look at people as like, you're really not fully an adult until you're 28.
It's true.
I look at all these young kids and I'm like, no, you're not an adult yet. Wait for your Saturn return.
Well, we're all living in our own, essentially our own birth charts.
Yeah.
So it's so speaking of, and we're talking about relationships, do you look at two people's charts and how they come together?
Yeah. And it's often used for romantic relationships, but you can use it for parent-child. You can use it for friends. You can use it for family members. You can use it for coworkers. We call that a compatibility or synastry chart. And you basically put the two charts together and you can understand where people will have more ease in their relationship and where they might have more challenges. There is no perfect person, in my opinion. You can have lots of different soulmates. But you can understand, again, where there might be ease and where there might be conflict.
Should you use it to decide if you should marry someone?
I think you can, definitely, as another way or tool of understanding how to interact with people through the challenging aspects. I would not, and I have told friends, no, read the chart of you and somebody romantically after only dating them for a couple weeks. And I do this.
So if someone comes to you and asks you to do that, you will say no.
I will say no if you've only been dating a few weeks. If you've been dating a few months and you are considering being serious with this person, yes, then let's talk. Let's look at the charts, make sure you have their permission. Love them to be present, ideally, in that reading. But if you just kind of want to know on your own, you have to get their permission for it. But this idea of if you're only like first dating someone and I tell you all the problems you're going to have, you may not give that person a full chance.
Yeah.
Versus when you know you really like that person or you want to be committed to that person. If I tell you, you guys spend money differently, you can say, okay, well, I want to work on that with this person and figure your way out of it, right? So if I say person A is a real heavy spender and person B is a real heavy saver, well, things you might think about doing if you want to stay in that relationship is we're going to keep separate bank accounts kind of thing. So from that perspective, if you are emotionally invested in that person, then you're willing to work on the challenging aspects. So again, when you're first dating it, and I'm like, oh, this guy is going to like use up all your money. You're like, cool, not going to date them anymore. And they might be a really great person for you otherwise. So yeah, I won't do it until you're like in a serious relationship. But yeah, I do think it's valuable to know before you get married. There's lots of like premarital counseling.
Yeah.
I would say astrology would fit into that bucket for sure.
I love that. Well, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I want to know, what is the perceived most dramatic planet? And I say perceived because there's perceptions around a lot, but you just even mentioned Saturn. You love Saturn. So I would love to know the perceived dramatic planet, and then what would you say is the most misunderstood?
Well, I would say the most dramatic planet, in my opinion, would be Pluto. Pluto was discovered right around the 1940s, around the same time as the atomic bomb, and they kind of do the same thing. So Pluto, whenever it enters a sign or a house, often destroys things, breaks them down in an effort to build something completely new. So I don't want to scare people with that, but it is important to know wherever Pluto's going, because it moves so slowly, it is there to change and evolve us at a very deep level. Pluto often brings up fears that we have to face and clear out to say, brings up all the stuff from underneath that many of us don't want to face. But it's really important to do that in order to have your soul evolve and grow. And often what's on the other side of that is something really beautiful. So I think it's a very dramatic planet, but it serves a very important purpose. The most misunderstood planet, in my opinion, is Saturn. Saturn is, I call it the adulting planet. It's the one that's going to make sure your house is clean and your bills are paid and you're, work first, play later kind of thing. And Saturn often gets a bad rap of being like, oh, such a killjoy kind of planet of like, oh, Saturn's moving through this house and it's just causing me all kinds of problems. I've learned to love Saturn. Saturn is what helps us, do the things necessary in our lives. And I've learned that if you resist Saturn, you tend to repeat lessons. that you don't want to repeat because they weren't pleasant the first time. But if you listen and say, what is the lesson I am meant to learn right now? And you do it, well, then often Saturn gives you gifts afterward.
We love gifts.
We love gifts. I love presents.
Present. So what would you say is, do you have a favorite placement in your own chart?
Oh, yes. My
Which
own
is?
chart. Well, Jupiter, of course. So Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of luck and abundance. It can also be extravagant, so you have to watch out for that too. But being ruled by Jupiter, I absolutely love it. Now, what's specific to my chart is that I have Jupiter in Leo, and my sun is in Sagittarius. And those are reciprocal signs, known as reciprocal signs. So it means that um, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, where my sun is, and the sun rules Leo, where my Jupiter is. So they are reciprocal signs. The other trick to it is they are also trining each other. A trine is 120-degree angle is considered the most positive aspect in astrology, where you just have natural gifts and things. So where my Jupiter and my sun are placed, it is a very strong placement of luck. It is a very strong placement of, Diane said, angelic protection. And I can look back, there's a lot of situations I put myself in over my life that probably shouldn't have made it out alive. But I did. I do feel divinely protected from that aspect.
But that doesn't mean you should be reckless.
No, I'm not reckless anymore. This was in my younger years.
That was unconscious recklessness, I think. Naivete, a little bit.
I mean, I did go bungee jumping in the Swiss Alps.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things that are like, maybe you shouldn't do that. But I do feel like it's like clear as day in my chart that I have my guardian angels protecting me. So I love it. I mean, everybody does.
I was
but,
like, well, we all have guardian
but
angels.
I have
That's
like
a beautiful
little
place.
bit of extra luck in my chart for me.
Okay, I love that.
I also have a lot of squares and a lot of challenges. So it's like the one good placement I have.
I think that's also a good point is that probably no one's birth chart is all sunshine and rainbows because we
No.
come here to learn. And so there's always going to be challenges. Now, you could have some years that are lighter than others, perhaps. So I want to ask that because I know I only have a few more questions, but when someone is looking at, they have their birth chart, and I've asked you this before, but if you have your birth chart and then you have transits, how do you think about the transit impact versus the natal chart placement? So again, you were mentioning like certain planets are in certain houses, but when it's transiting, it's in a different house. So how do the two connect or correlate?
So we look at how the transiting planets are making aspects to your natal birth chart. So right now, transiting Jupiter is in Gemini. That is opposite all of my Sagittarius placements. So I am looking at how Jupiter, whatever degree point it's at, is how it's impacting whatever planet I have in an opposition. So I'm looking at those transits and how they are connecting to the planets in your birth chart. And that's how we get our predictions, our forecasts.
Got it. Amazing. So what's one thing you want people to walk away with knowing about astrology?
I would love for everyone to have a basic understanding of astrology and a basic understanding of their own chart. That would be my wish for the world.
It might be closer than you think.
However you get that understanding is up to you, but I do believe it's really important and impactful. We had mentioned, I think, in our first episode about if you just understand what your dominant element is in your chart, you can use it as a tool for grounding and how you kind of manage through tough emotions. If you understand your moon and how you react emotionally, you can be prepared for that. So I also have, like I mentioned, a Sagittarius moon, which tends to be non-committal and likes to suppress emotions. I could have continued suppressing emotions for the rest of my life. That could lead to health issues and other bigger problems. But I said, no, I want to grow in this life. I want to be a healthy person. So I am going to learn how to accept my emotions and process those emotions. So it's harder for me to like cry, for instance. So I now know that I can put on a sad movie, usually anything where an animal dies, and I will just sob. And I can release a lot of emotions through crying by watching something that maybe isn't even related to what I'm feeling in that sense, because I might have trapped emotions that I'm not even aware of because toxic positivity and all that associated with that moon sign, that I will make myself cry so that I can get that stuff out.
We're going to talk about emotion code one of these days too, because that's a way to help get trapped emotions out. Well, and I think for me, I wish everyone at least knew their big three, because think about all the times you meet someone and they say, "Oh, you're a Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio." And you're like, "But you act very different than me." And I think a lot of that is because of those other placements, and that we are not just one thing. We are a whole plethora of things. Like you mentioned, your planets in Sagittarius. I think I have a ton in Scorpio. So a lot of those really are part of the makeup of who we are.
Completely. As I mentioned before, I have never seen two same charts. Even twins born minutes apart are going to have some variations in their chart because they're not the same person. Then you have to factor in how we operate on our energetic spectrum. There's high vibration, low vibration kind of things. And that, I mean, I would definitely, people have asked me, like, do you like the astrology apps? I'm like, definitely. If you want a quick read on what's going on, you want a quick understanding of some transits or even an understanding of your birth chart, by all means, they're great. They're pretty accurate. What you don't get from an app that you would get from an actual astrologer is a reading of your energy and where you are on your vibrational spectrum. If you are someone who often operates at a high vibration, I will pick that up and I will give you a particular reading that is going to be associated with where you are on that spectrum. If you are someone who operates on the lower end of the spectrum vibrationally, then you'll have a different experience. So I'm going to read in that way. Now, I always read with a positive outlook because that's who I am. So you have to factor that into your astrologer as well. I have gone to astrologers who are very doom and gloom. And I'm like, cool. I'm pretty sure that's not who I am. So that person didn't resonate with me. I tend to be a more positive person. I've been working on my own healing. I feel like I most days operate on a higher vibration. So like I said, I don't have a hard time with harder transits, but I've done a lot of work on myself to get there. So an app isn't going to be able to tell you that, but they are going to give you some good and accurate information.
So where can people connect with you or get a reading?
Oh, yeah. On my website is thisastrolife.com. You can book a session. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy.
If people aren't sure, but they might want to do it, do you have a way for people to connect via your website just to maybe ask some questions or even have a quick chat with you just to see if it's for them?
Yeah, you can book a free consultation where we'll spend some time, usually on the phone, and we'll talk through what your challenges are, what you're looking for, what you want to know, and then we'll figure out what the right reading is for you. Or if you're even a fit with me, like we can just chat and you can see if you're an energetic fit. That's totally fine too. You can also email me. I do offer mini readings as well. These are recorded, so they're not a live session, but if you have a particular question that you would like answer on, or if you want just to know your big three, then I will do a recording for you and send that to you as well.
And what information do they need to provide you in order for you to do a reading?
We need to know your birth date, the place, and ideally the time. The time is what designates your rising sign. It's typically found on your birth certificate. If you do not know your time, then I would work with you to dowse for a time that we feel like and that's using a pendulum. Dowsing, and that's another thing we're going to talk about. But I would use that as a way to get as close as possible to your birth time, which I've done for clients before. And we'll talk through the rising sign that time would indicate. And then you tell me if you feel like that fits or not.
I love that. Is there anything that I haven't asked or something on your mind you want to share about astrology before we?
I mean, I just love it. And I want everyone to love it. You don't all have to learn it. But again, I feel like it's such an incredible tool for understanding, again, your purpose. One thing we didn't talk about is astrology shows some wounds that you came into this life with that need healing. And I definitely know what my wounds are. So that's been, if you're like, I don't really know where I need to start on my healing journey, we would start there and we'd figure out what those are and get you on the right path.
Well, and I think we talked about this maybe in a previous session, but I think first and foremost, start with yourself, learning about yourself. But I've done a connection chart with my husband and I've done one with both of my boys, and understanding both my kids has also allowed me to understand who they are a lot better. And doesn't hurt to have a personal astrologer in your pocket, because she'll be like, hey, remember that thing I told you? That's what's happening. which is great, but it really is good for kids as well. And I think she mentioned too that she has given my 17-year-old his reading, and you're never too young to start learning about yourself, or even what you think you know. There's too much conditioning in the world that this really allows you to see truly who you are and the beauty that you bring, the challenges that you signed up for, and then be able to work on those so that you can really have a very fulfilling and exciting life. So
Life's supposed to be fun.
it really is. And so with that said, I think we're going to close out. Next session podcast will be human design.
I'm going to ask you all the questions.
So we're going to flip the script, but what I love about it is that as part of human design, astrology fits within that. So it's another tool, and it's very complementary, and I would highly recommend have your birth chart, but also have a human design session too, because the information can be very similar, but there are different aspects, and how we come about it is very different. So
yeah, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of astrology as here's your energetic blueprint, and human design is now how do I use that energy in the world?
yeah, I think
How does that energy manifest?
I think that's very true. We also call human design your energetic blueprint, but I would say we give you specific tools that allow you to leverage that energy to the best of its ability. And so, yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited to talk about it.
So fun.
So thanks everybody for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed learning about astrology and all that Dana had to share. And hopefully you'll join us on the next episode where we talk about human design.
Awesome.
See ya.
Thanks for catching up with us on the Cosmic Catch-Up. If today's episode sparked something in your soul, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share the magic with your fellow seekers. You can hang with us on Instagram at the Cosmic Catch-Up for behind-the-scenes updates and more cosmic goodness.
And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, we offer personal guidance through our individual practices. All the details are in the show notes. And if it's aligned, we trust you'll feel it. Until next time, keep following the magic. The content we share reflects our personal experiences, insights, and opinions. We're not medical, legal, or financial professionals, and we encourage you to always do your own research, trust your intuition, and seek guidance from qualified experts when needed. Take what resonates and leave the rest. This journey is yours to explore.